What's up, mi gente? I'm Gata, güeyita favorita, y estamos en Perreo 101, Perreo 101, Regueton con la Gata. In this episode, I want to talk about the commercialization of reggaeton. Vamos para allá. The commercialization of reggaeton, because as we all see, reggaeton is the biggest genre in the world. You know, normal, no big deal. And I want to go there by starting off with one of the most common threads in terms of this conversation, the whitewashing of the genre, right? Oh my goodness, the genre, the music is not like it used to be. There's a lot of difference in the sounds. There's a lot of difference in its ambassadors and stuff like that. That is all very true. And also, there's a lot of stuff to celebrate. I'm not trying to detract one thing from the other, but I am a true believer in that multiple things could be true at the same time, mi gente. Vamos para allá. I think there's a lot of things to celebrate right now, including the fact that reggaeton is the number one genre in the world, period. The fact that reggaeton is now taking over TV. If you know, you know. I mean, I know that you already see Neon because you're here, because you love me. So, I mean, Neon is a reggaeton comedy that has debuted on Netflix starring Tyler Dean Flores, Courtney Taylor, Emma Pilar Ferreira, and Jordan Mendoza. It's a show about a kid, Tyler Dean Flores or Santi, who wants to make his way in the music industry, and it's a comedy. The reggaeton is never the punchline. That was very important to me. But it's a comedy about the funny things that he goes through on his path of trying to make it to the top. Daddy Yankee's executive producer. Shout out to Max Earl and Shay Serrano, as well as my partner in crime, Susie Exposito, who was co-executive consultant along with me. We all worked on this project, and it is now available on Netflix. But yeah, you already know that because of course you watched the show already. Of course you watched it, of course. I want to pull on this thread in regards to the things that, are available to celebrate. Not just that, there's La Firma, there is Bravas, there are a number of reggaeton shows. There is El Ganador of Nicky Jam. The list goes on and on and on. If anything, the number is only increasing, which is beautiful because reggaeton is something that is complex, that reflects different facets of life, and that should be celebrated in different manners. In this particular case, it was in a comedy. More importantly, I want to be able to get down to the nitty gritty of like what makes reggaeton a global phenomenon, because the truth is, and the point is, reggaeton no va para ningún lado, mi gente. Reggaeton's not going anywhere, okay? Get with it or get lost. So with that said, I really want to dig into like what are the actual kinks that make this work? What makes a hit show a hit show? And to better be able to talk about this, I have the pleasure of presenting my next guest, my first guest of the podcast, Oz Rodriguez, film director. You might know his work like Vampires in the Bronx, also on Netflix. And also, he directed the SNL special that Bass Bunny happened to star in on SNL. And as well as, of course, the pilot of Neon. Oz, mi amor, ¿cómo tú estás?
Estamos aquí en Perreo 101 con la Gata.
Oz, mi amor, of course, I know you very well. I know your work very well. I, of course, am a big fan of yours. But for those who are just, arriving to the party, a little late, not too late, but a little late, tell the people who you are, who is Oz Rodriguez, this amazing film director that stands before me.
Who is Oz Rodriguez? Oz Rodriguez is un dominicano from the DR, Santo Domingo. I am a director. I have worked in the biz and comedy for a little bit. I grew up in the Caribbean, grew up in the Dominican Republic, moved to Los Angeles to pursue filmmaking. And in the States, in Los Países, I started making sketches with my friends. And that got me a job on Saturday Night Live. And that changed my life, obviously. It was an insane place to be a part of. And it opened my professional life. It opened many doors in my professional life, I guess. And from there, I made a movie called Vampires versus the Bronx, which was a movie with a bunch of Latino kids running around the Bronx trying to defeat the vampires that are trying to take over the neighborhood. And recently made another movie called Miguel Wants to Fight on Hulu about this kid who wants to get into his first fight. And very important, related to this podcast, I also shot the pilot for Neon, coming out October 19th on Netflix. And it is a show about a group of friends that moved to Miami to try to make it in reggaeton.
Us, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Of course, we got so much to cover, so let's go right into it, right? Now, let's talk about reggaeton in film. What is the power of reggaeton in film? What does it mean to you, and what does it mean for the culture?
Sure, sure. I mean, definitely grew up in the Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo, so have heard reggaeton and sort of seen its rise from, when I'm growing up, it was Vico C doing his thing, and that led to people like Daddy Yankee and Tego, and like just to see that blow all the way up, has been impressive and crazy, and obviously a source of pride for anyone from the Caribbean. Um, but yeah, it's musically, sonically, it is the number one thing. But I feel there wasn't a lot of narrative stories being told in that world, so this was a really exciting opportunity. And I think also because it's a comedy, it's exciting because like it's a look at that industry, um, but it's it gives an opportunity for uh, the cast full of sort of the Caribbean diaspora and the reggaetoneros to be silly, to be goofy, and that's not something that you really get to see a lot from them because they're doing the music videos and looking cool in the photos and whatnot, being artists, but like just the chance to like be silly on a TV show that is global. It was really exciting, a really exciting opportunity to be a part of. And basically, it's time. It's like it's time that someone told a story in the space because like we are all dancing to it. So like there's more opportunities, there's more stories to tell. So yeah, really excited for people to check it out and and to see what we did in that space.
And with all of that said, what makes reggaeton's trajectory in film different than other genres? Of course, there's hip hop films, right? We all know Boys in the Hood. We all know, I mean, there's more movies than I can even mention at this point because it's simply so embedded in culture. It is a culture in and of itself in regards to film. And I feel like reggaeton is now trying to hop on that same wave. Well, not now, but now more furiously, right? So, what is it about reggaeton that makes its trajectory different in film? What's the power of this music?
Well, I guess for me, the most interesting thing is just the language. It's so interesting that so many people have accepted it and don't know that Mr. Benito is saying some real crazy things. And like I've seen kids like, you know, dance to some of the shit that he's saying. And I'm like, he just said something crazy. Uh, but yeah, that's been really interesting of like that the language hasn't been a crazy barrier and some of reggaeton is enjoyed by people that maybe don't speak Spanish, and that's been really interesting to see that rise and that connection and sort of how it's being the sort of globalization, if you will, because like obviously in the Caribbean and the diaspora spreads it around, and people from the Caribbean are the coolest people, so we're going to be listened to, but it also like it like went past that, like truly global in a way that I wish I knew, like, but like I've seen like people in Japan dance reggaeton. I've seen like I saw I was lucky enough to go to Rome once, and there was a street party, and I saw two things: people, Italians dancing bachata, and Italians in trying to perrear, which was several degrees of failures, but they tried. But yeah, that was really that was fascinating to see like how big it had gone, and I think maybe streaming has a part of that, but yeah, it's I don't know, but it's impressive uh, how how reggaeton has touched the four corners of the world.
Now, mira, it's no secret reggaeton has a reputation for being raw and very sexy, right? And there's different ways to portray that, and it's something that is, I think, is really hard to capture on camera. How do you think about that? Like, You did an amazing job with the pilot, capturing different complexities and essences in regards to reggaeton. How do you go about making sure that it's authentic on camera?
Um, I mean, it's something we talked about. Like, I think we we there is perreo, and it is a thing that exists, and it is a sexy form, and people express themselves in that way, and we didn't want to shy away from that. Like, I remember there was a conversation about Santi's video, and like, you know, when you make a pilot, you have a lot of conversations with the studio, with the producers, and you go over everything because it's a big endeavor, and people sort of, there's nerves because you haven't done it before. So there was a Zoom about Perreo, like, should we have Perreo? And I was definitely on the we must perrear because that is how uh, people are dancing really close, and I think you got to reflect that. You got to reflect the sexiness, so it feels authentic, so people feel like we're representing the genre, and within that, we can have interesting conversations about uh, some of the aspects that could be sort of tricky or outdated in reggaeton, let's say.
Now, this question is a little similar to the one before, but stay with me. Stay with me. How do you personally and professionally see to it that reggaeton is as real as possible on camera? Which I think is different from like, keeping the authenticity of like the world on camera, but like reggaeton itself, like how do you see to it personally and professionally? Like, what do you do?
Ooh, well, to echo some of the things I already said, I think we haven't really seen stories like this, and it's a awesome opportunity to just be silly. Like, Latino representation is important, but I'm here for the goofy representation. Um, I mean, just like the chance to like that we got to work with Tiny, and he produced all these songs, and he like made a like we wanted the music in the show to feel good, because sometimes you watch shows and TV and movies, and they're like, oh, it's such a good song. You hear it, you're like, oh, it's okay. But yeah, we needed bangers, and we got the dude and his team to sort of build the reggaeton music space in this show. So that's one reason people should see it. It's the music's amazing, and like you were saying, joy is what I ultimately I the experience that I want people to have is to have fun, to have received experienced joy, like you were saying. Um, but yeah, I think it's also a chance to like uh, look into the reggaeton music industry, especially if you didn't know a lot about it. But ultimately, it's a story about these characters, this group of three friends, and then becomes four, and just to follow their journey as they started from the bottom and hopefully get to the top of the reggaeton mountain. Um, so yeah, I feel like there's many aspects of Neon that make it cool and interesting, and like the vibrancy of the visuals too. Like, we really embraced the look of Miami and the, again, Caribbean diaspora, which is vibrant, but also wanted it to be grounded and realistic so that it could look cool, but you could still feel things and feel those heartfelt moments. So that's my long rambling version answer as to why Neon is important. People should check it out.
I like that. I like that a lot. Now, what are you looking forward to, as the reggaeton is turning more into film, like in general? Like, now that reggaeton is now going into the more visual world, which is something I'm excited for because, as we all know, and side note, this is when I'm like ranting as a historian, of course, right? Reggaeton history, a lot of reggaeton history was actually damaged, in a very famous like moment where a very famous film director actually had to throw a lot of videos into the pool because he was being sought after by the CIA, Interpol, and the FBI. Reggaeton fun fact. He was actually being sought after because it's alleged that a lot of the girls in the music videos were underage. And so a lot of the parents were actually joining forces with Ella Gonzalez. I know my shit, you guys. Um, in order to, see to it if that was true or not. So the day that they raided his house, él tiró toda esa vaina para la piscina. He threw all that in the pool. My point is, of course, there's a ton that's documented. There's the reggaeton history being made every day, but also there's a lot from like our very famous like favorite songs that we will never be able to see because a lot of it was destroyed. So I'm excited, particularly for things to be done in an ethical manner, of course, but more importantly, it's for it to just be done in general. Reggaeton deserves to be documented in film. So, dígame, what are you looking forward to, us?
I'm looking for more stories just in general, just like literally more in quantity. Like we just need more. We need the goofy version. We need the dramatic version. We need the sci-fi version. We need like there's just like we are so underserved as an audience, and I think and it doesn't just have to be reggaeton uh sort of stories. Like it's like I'm gonna go past it into sort of Caribbean diaspora stories. Like we're very severely lacking those stories, and all those stories would be in real life soundtrack to that music. But yeah, I just want to see more, and I think we're getting there slowly. There's more and more filmmakers that are trying things, and I think like yeah, it's a really exciting. Like, I mean, Bad Bunny's hosting SNL next week. Like, that's pretty crazy. Like, it, I feel like we still haven't reached like its full potential. It's just going to keep going, and yeah, I just hope like Hollywood maybe sees like the idea of reggaeton, but really for me, it's like the Caribbean diaspora and uses that to tell more stories that are of all shapes and colors and styles and whatnot.
Now, us, we got something common. We worked on Neon together, this amazing show that the people are gonna watch, right? Right, right. So, with that said, I need to ask you, what was your process? What was it like? What was your experience like filming this pilot? Like, tell me a story, please.
Yeah, I'll give you two moments. I think just or not even what the first one's not even a moment. It's just like a general vibe or feeling of like it was really amazing to work in Puerto Rico and land. Like I remember landing there and just the el calorcito. I was like, oh yeah, I know this, and just to be able to speak Spanish with the crew and like and have production meetings with some arroz habichuela is valuable and amazing and to like really get into it in Spanish with like Diana Matos, who's a cinematographer, and Mailara Santana, production designer, and Yasiri Castro, wardrobe, like to get down in it with them and like figure out what the show was going to be like and have those conversations in Spanish in the Caribbean was an amazing experience that I will always cherish. And then another story that started off pretty terribly was the last shoot day that we had. The last scene of the pilot, the gang they sneak into this party, or they're allowed into this party, I guess. And so it was an overnight shoot, and there was a thunderstorm. So we would like shoot for 20 minutes, and then all start raining. And I was like, "Sorry, John Zeta, you gotta have to wait a little bit before we finish your scene." uh, so I had all like John Zeta and Brray and Jaco, all these people like waiting while it friggin' rained. So like as soon as like it stopped raining, I was like, "All right, Jaco, let's go." And he'd go out there and kill it, of course. And then it started raining again. It's like, okay, I gotta hold. Uh, so yeah, it went on all night long. So we finished at 6 a.m. Like the last shot, you could see the sun basically creeping out in the corner of the frame. And the poor background actors, like, at 5 a.m., I'm like, all right, guys, let's dance. You love it, Jaco. Let's go. So that was a wild night that thank God we got everything because it started off real crappy.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, aquí en Perreo 101. Ya ustedes saben, go follow my boy Oz en todas las redes and all social media. This Is Oz. He directed the pilot of Neon as well as many other works, amazing works. Go look him up. Go Google him. Thank you for being here, Oz. Mi gente, we have a jam. Like, this episode's about to really get spicy. Because I'm about to talk with my homegirl, Loren, who is the CEO and founder of Gata Marketing. More importantly, she's a badass bitch and an industry vet who has seen, I mean, from a structural level, the evolution of this music, working on the labels, working on the publicity side and the marketing side as she does now, and successfully at that. Mi gente, presenting Loren Guerra of Guerra Marketing. Mi amor, ¿cómo tú estás?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me. What an honor. Gracias.
Bueno, mi amor, there's a lot of things I want to discuss with you. Let's hop right to it. Okay, you ready? Loren, talk to me about you working in the industry. You've been working in the industry, tú eres joven, but you're an industry vet, okay? Talk to me about you working in the industry just in general, especially during the time of like the 2000s when reggaeton was popping in la calle, but the labels weren't so sure if they wanted to touch it or not. Not in a grand way, not like they're doing now. Anyway, talk to me about that.
Well, I can tell you right now that I was the underdog of all the product managers in Sony. That is for sure because, when I first started in Sony, I came in 2000 so okay, a little bit of context. I had an artist signed to Sony. She was a Dominican bilingual female rapper, and she signed to a project called Sindicato that essentially was going to be like a Latino Wu-Tang, right? And so when I first came in, she got signed in 2003, and so that's what started my relationship with Sony. But I came from hip hop, so prior to me being in Latin, I used to work hip hop. As you know, I'm a big hip hop head, and so I came in with a marketing strategy. I'm like, all right, we need to get street teams, we need to do mixtapes, we need to do this and this and this, and Sony had no idea. Like Sony, the only record label that actually was moving the needle in 2005 was Machete. I'm not sure what the date of the inception of Machete Records is, but Universal was the only label, Machete specifically was the only label that knew how to market um uh, urban artists. So when I come in to Sony, it was like I was shell shocked. I was like, wait, you guys don't have a DJ database? Like how do you get these records to the street? And they're like, no, we service radio. And I said, radio? O sea, how do you get this in the clubs? Like, not all DJs that spin in the clubs spin in radio. So, like, how are you not where? So that it was. There were so many things, Gata. So there was no DJ database. They didn't know what street teams were, and I'm like, how do you say street team posters in Spanish? Ni sabía. They're like, then I realized it was pancartas, but it was just like, we need to put these records in mixtapes, and they're like, oh, but those are given away for free, or people buy them. I used to buy them in Boston. I used to buy DJ Clue's mixtapes in downtown Boston. All right, I used to take the train. So every time he dropped a new CD and a new mixtape, I would go and buy it. And I was like, yes, I know that it's free, but this is how people get discovered. And so I'm like, we need to start like Tego doing the DJ Who Kid being on his mixtape was revolutionary. I'm like, this is what we need to be doing. So, anyways, there was a lot of like education on my end because I knew how to market hip hop. I worked in hip hop, so I brought that to the table, but none of that was being done. So, it was very jarring to come in from working hip hop to working in a label that was predominantly pop. And again, if you weren't at Machete, nobody cared about urban. That is the absolute truth. These labels did not care about urban, not in the Latin space. Okay. So Gus Lopez was definitely like ahead of his time with that. So, the head publicist at Sony didn't want anything to do with reggaeton or urban. I don't think it was because, I mean, I think because she didn't understand it. Or maybe, it was not music that was, like not music for her. Because it was gritty. It still is, and eso no era para todo el mundo. So, when it came down to like budget, resources, I didn't have a PR team. I had to do the PR. I had to mail out my own like los betas, when we would like the videos, when we would circulate videos and service videos, I had to like mandar a hacer 50 betas VHS and send those out to TV, to MTV, que no sé qué. I had to do that on my own. I didn't have an assistant, so I didn't have resources. They didn't give us the budget until it started becoming so profitable that they had no choice. And then at some point in those 4 years that I was there, it was like reggaeton was a phase, because all these radio stations sprouted all over the country that their format was only reggaeton, and then they started to dwindle. And then reggaeton started banning it in some places, like Calle 13 was banned from well, he insulted the mayor of Puerto Rico, or so the governor or whatever it was, I forgot. Pero nada, the point being is that it just like it had its moment. It was very short lived. It was like boom, boom, boom. There was like the megaton, and there was all these big events and all these stations, and then all of a sudden, yeah, and then these artists quedaron con la espada, entre la espada y la pared, and they were like, oh my God, well, okay, let's start doing tropical music, I guess, and then you started seeing the shift. So, it was just like, I was the underdog for so long, at its peak, at its down, when it was down, when it was up, because I just think that, like, even though at some point, like, an artist like Calle 13 was a major priority, I mean, they weren't even reggaeton. They were only reggaeton really with like the first and half of the second album. Pero, como que, even though they did bet on some artists, I don't feel like they took it very seriously. That they're like, let's just bet on this now and put some money behind it now. Pero this is gonna go away, and that was the attitude. It was wild. It was wild. It's nice to see now how much of a force it is, and there's like no turning back now. Because when I was in 2017, I went to Jordan, Amman. I went to Jordan over there in the Middle East, and when I heard Despacito playing in a car on the street, and in Beirut, everywhere in Lebanon, I was like, what? So that was pretty cool. And then at that not at that moment, but that just reaffirmed the notion that like it's never gonna go back to the way it was. Yeah. O sea, like, we're here to stay. Whether it's like traditional reggaeton or reggaeton mixed with something else.
No, so with all of that said, talk to me about like what was it like seeing the transition between like physical CD sales to digital? Because I mean, girl, you saw Limewire coming. This is a whole different angle. Like, what was that like seeing that transition? Like literally, what were you doing? Like, what were these companies doing? How were they adjusting? What was that like? Talk to me.
Right. So I just want to say a quick fun fact. In 1997, I was a hostess at TGI Fridays in Miami, and I was a hostess and like a bar girl, some weird title there, but basically I used to serve like food during happy hour, and I was really tight with like everyone in the kitchen, and there was a group of guys that were from Puerto Rico. They barely spoke English, and they worked in the kitchen. And I was like, growing up, dance hall was like the first music that I really fell in love with. So I started hearing like reggae in Spanish, and I was like, ¿qué es esto? And I was like, oye, I was like, ¿y esto qué es? He's like, eso es reggaeton, eso es de Puerto Rico. And I was like, Diablo, I like this. So then he started like that was the first time I got introduced to reggaeton. So that was 97. Then fast forward, I get hired at Sony in 2005. And it was like My first day on the job was a video shoot with Zion and Lennox and Pitbull and Voltio, and so that was like everything was just happening. My first day on the job was, this is your priority artist. Their name is Calle 13. They have a song called Se Vale Todo. And I was like, what? I'm like, I know this music. I know this. Hold up. Like, I've been known about this. And so, um, once I started to understand the movement, I was going a lot to Puerto Rico, understanding la jerga, o sea, like the jargon. I was like, wait, what are you saying? Because I'm Colombian, Palestinian, and Cuban, so like I didn't understand that jargon at all. And even though I had, Puerto Rican friends, it was different, like the street language and all the music. So it was like I was learning so much. I was learning so much. It was a beautiful era of like understanding not just the music, but I also wanted to understand, like, where it came from, like what words were used, like the whole movement, right? So that I was always super intrigued by that. So, I started, and there were still CDs, obviously. There were still CDs, and then the transition started happening around 2007, 2008. And throwing Napster in the mix, throwing Limewire in the mix, and the industry just plummeted. Like it just tanked, and everyone was scrambling, and then the layoffs started happening, and it was a wild time. But it took the record labels a long time to figure out how to capitalize, how to make money from selling CDs, which was really straightforward, to people just being like, well, you know, I think the consumer in part did not feel guilty about pirating songs and about like grabbing free content, because what happens a lot of times was like artists would make a CD, an album, right? And you'd buy the CD, which was like anywhere from like $15 to $20, and you had 17 records, and out of those 17 records, there was like 14 fillers and 3 hit singles. And people were kind of like, damn, it was so disappointing because you couldn't hear it before. You had to just literally buy the CD, and then you'd hear it, and then you'd be so disappointed that you spent $20. And in your 20s, or when you're teens, $20 is a lot, for one CD. And I think that, that threw in a wrench in the game, and that was very favorable to the consumer, but obviously not to the record label. It took years before record labels got their shit together and learned how to monetize from sales again. So yeah, I lived all that. It was wild. It was wild.
Now, Loren, you've been crucial in the success stories of many cool artists. I mean, you still are. Like Alvaro Diaz, one of my favorites. Yendri, Caliuchis. The list goes on and on and on. Kenyos, vamos para allá. Like, you've had Becky G. You've had some amazing, amazing artists. Talk to me about your process. What is it about Guerrera marketing that, like, gets it there?
I want to first give a shout out to my mentor, Lorenzo Brown. Lorenzo now works for over at 360 and manages the whole Latin division, and he manages Rawayana and Piso 21. Um, I I wouldn't be here today had it not been for him. I had a really good mentor who is a brilliant man who is so creative, and I think that he saw a lot of that in me and really fostered my talent. He really nurtured my talent, and so that was, that's at the forefront of everything. And then um, I learned from him that every single artist that you work merits a tailored approach. And so, when I first started with Calle 13, there was obviously a huge difference between Calle 13 and Alexi Hifido. Even there was even a big difference between Alexi Hifido and Voltio. You know, There was a big difference between, I worked also on the tropical side. I had Gilberto Santa Rosa, like Gilberto, even though Gilberto and Victor Manuel were both salseros, it was different. El Gran Combo, it was different. So I learned that, regardless if you're working artists of the same genre, it was really important to know their story and to understand like them further, much further than the music. And I think having that context, understanding, and that's what I said when I first started working reggaeton, it was so important for me to not just like, oh, the music's cool, I love this. Obviously, I come from dance hall. I come from listening to like, Capleton and all these artists. Um, and it was a natural progression for me to love reggaeton and dance hall in español, right? Reggae en español. But for me, I always knew that in order for me to do a good job, I had to understand the artist. I had to understand where they came from. I had to understand that, Calle 13 comes from, a family in the arts versus Voltio, who comes from more from the street. You know what I'm saying? And like, what was his upbringing versus, Alexis and Fido's upbringing, and like, how did their life experiences shape the music? So I think, till this day, I always have like really personal conversations with my artists, whether, we smoke a couple blunts and talk about it or we have it over drinks. I think it's really important to get to know people, where they come from, what their story, what their vision is. Like there's artists who I know so well as people, and like creatively I know them so well, because I feel like you could know someone on a personal level, but also like you need to know somebody creatively, like their creative vision. Alvaro Diaz is somebody that I know, if I watch a certain movie, I know I can hit him up and be like, yo, you gotta watch this because I know this is gonna blow your mind. Me and him are like, have the same taste in a lot of the stuff in the arts. And I think that's important, right? So I think, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. It's really important to have a tailored approach and to really understand the human side of the artist and the creative side of the artists, and their story and where they come from and how that has influenced everything that they do, from the way that they dress to the music that they make to the way that they express themselves to the issues that they champion, everything.
Now, Loren, what I love about you, I love you for so many reasons, but one of them being, notwithstanding, the fact that you work with a lot of black artists, girl. You just get us. You know how to move us and whatnot in the industry. Talk to me about that, like why you made that conscious decision. And more importantly, what helps and hurts them. Like you see this process. You brought Jano as a tiny desk. She has a lot more to go. She acaba de cumplir su 18, una bebé leche. Like she's very young. She has a lot more to go, of course. But I mean, I'm clapping very hard at everything she's like been able to achieve just as far, and she's only starting, right? And she's just one of many artists that you've worked with. Talk to me about what helps them and what hurts them, and why you make that conscious decision. Why? Why at all? You don't have to, but I know you get it. So like, don't tell it for me. Tell it for the people who are watching and listening.
Yeah. Um. Whew. Um. I think one thing that helps is definitely like physical appearance. For instance, like, I think one of Jay Noah's big success is obviously like her talent, her innate talent to write. I mean, she has bars, but I think that she's getting a lot more attention than other female rappers who also got bars because she's beautiful. And I think that works to her advantage because, you know because she's so pretty. I think she's getting much more attention, and I think that helps a lot. I think that opens doors a lot. um this is not the case for any artist that I work, but I think when you have proximity to whiteness, that helps. You know what I mean? Because J Noah is dark, pero it's undeniable that she's beautiful. O sea, so I think that, if she wasn't as beautiful, but she was more light skinned, that would also help her. You know what I mean? So she's blessed in every way, because not only is she gorgeous, but she's also like super talented, and she's really smart. And so there's nothing that she doesn't have. I think, for other artists, you know, I think it's interesting, like who they date. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times, like that could be very helpful. You know, everything that has proximity to whiteness helps. I've heard a lot of people say, "Y esto de verdad que me encabrona," you know, but it's like someone like Goyo, for instance, who's also striking and beautiful. But I've heard a lot of people say like, es una negra fina, tiene unas facciones finas. And yeah, es como que, it's like suddenly she's more pulida, es más pulida. It's like they accentuate anything that's more refined. And by more refined, I mean a thinner nose. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So, like, less Afrocentric features, helpful. Or if you're if you're very very dark, then you have to be striking. You know what I mean? So I think that on the physical aspect, the more proximity, and also like behavioral, you know what I mean? I think, when you hear an artist like Bosa speak, and you hear how well spoken he is and well mannered, that plays to his advantage. But if he's a little bit unruly like someone else, then it's like, no, no, no. While other white artists get to be unruly as fuck, that's okay. um yeah, and I think the other part of the question was what's not helpful.
And so many ways that we could talk about this right now, girl. But to conclude, what do you think made reggaeton global? Like, you've seen this process, you know what it takes inside and out. You've been on both sides in regards to corporate, in regards to moving as an entrepreneur. In which case, felicidades otra vez. I don't think I say that enough to you for everything that you're accomplishing, girl. Let me give you your flowers. But talk to me. What do you think made reggaeton global? Like, what is it about the music?
I think I want to give credit in part, because there's like, it's not just like a one answer, but I want to give credit in part to Colombia, like the way that Colombia revived a part of reggaeton in a romantic way. It started they like romanticized it, and I think that ended up appealing to like a really bigger audience, because I feel like there's a lot of people who are conservative, and if you're conservative, really conservative, because there's some people who like to act like they're anyway. But I feel like, it started to have a much more mass appeal to even like older people, because they made it romantic. It wasn't so gritty, it wasn't so sexual. It was sexual, but not in a how do I what's the word, it was still sexual, but it wasn't grimy. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't el combo la combi completa type shit. So, right, it wasn't vulgar. Yeah, it's like, for me, it's like I don't really use those words, because I think sex is natural, and it doesn't like, whatever. Okay, yeah, vulgar. Let's just use vulgar. So, anyways, but I think in part that was it. So they made it more pop because of the lyrics, and I think melodically too, it became a global phenomenon, because like the first reggaeton that I heard, that was like gritty. It was like the dance hall that I used to listen to, that was like raw, and like all the chants and shit. It was so hard. Like the real dance hall, not Sean Paul, like the real, like, underground cats.
I mi amor, thank you so much for being here in Perreo 101. Mi gente, this is Loren Gata of Get Head Marketing. Go follow her. You already follow all her artists. You already know who Danny Lux is. You've seen that billboard during the time of Coachella, talking about his dad and how the first time he went there era para limpiar ese mismo estadio. Pero ahora él fue para ver su hijo cantar en tarima. You saw that. That was her. Know that was her. Mi gente, this is Loren Get It Marketing. Show her some love. Loren, thank you for being here. Bueno, mi gente, that's all the time that we have for this episode. God knows it could keep going on and on and on. But I think we got a lot of gems with these two amazing guests that I was able to have here. Oz Rodriguez and Loren Guerra. Go ahead and make sure that you show them some love. Mi gente, yo soy Gata, tu gatita favorita. This is Perreo 101. Reggaeton con la Gata. Subscribe. Make sure to subscribe.